Hi everybody, this is Jenny Lauder again. Welcome to Lesson 7. We are talking about operationalization of variables and data collection. When we think about this concept, it might feel rather overwhelming to think about it initially, but this is where we really want to set you up for success when you're moving forward with your methods. And so when you're thinking about the concepts of what you're measuring, think about your research question and the thing that you're interested in, your concept. It might not be really concrete, and it might not be something simple as measuring range of motion, but it might be measuring something like depression, level of function, resiliency, grit. Well, how do we measure that? And really, how do we define it? So this is what you're doing this lesson. So it's really important to make sure that you are defining and operationalizing what your concept is. And then you might find in the literature that there are already instruments out there that have operationally defined your concept and ways of measuring it, which is really pretty exciting. However, you might need to operationally define your concept yourself, which is totally fine. So when you think about these concepts, they're not necessarily concrete. So when we think about function, me as a physical therapist, I might think of function differently than a speech therapist or a nurse. So I might be thinking of, boy, I need to really measure the way that person is getting in and out of bed and how they're walking, what their strength is. And the occupational therapist might think, boy, I really need to measure how are they getting ready in the morning, how is their occupation affected. And so that's why we really need to define operationally what your concept is. Excuse me. So if you're looking at, for instance, an increase in knowledge for your participants, well then how are you going to define that operationally? And then really, how are you going to measure it? So when we think about your concepts, you really want to find a way to quantitatively measure your concept, because then that way you can determine if there's changes within that concept, because in essence you're probably looking at some sort of an intervention or something that might make a change in your concept. And so this lesson will really help to focus in on really what are you looking at and how you are defining it. So your resources for this lesson, you've got the Cottrell and McKenzie book that will really talk about some operational definitions. The Patton book chapter will give you some definitions on variables. The Pollitt and Beck helps with data collection, sampling, and then Dr. Moore has a PowerPoint and a video about how to operationalize your variables. This lesson also includes how you're looking at data collection. And so when you think about when you've taken a survey, it gives you an idea of potentially how some studies will collect their data. But again, it depends on your study design. And so your resources will help walk you through that. So your assignment this week really will help to walk you through how to operationalize your concept, your variables, and how to think about your data collection. And so again, if you're thinking about your concepts, think about how you're going to operationalize them. If you're thinking about, for example, if I'm measuring grit, how would I assess grit? How do I define it? And then is there an assessment tool out there that helps me measure grit? And then you're also going to be then looking at your data collection. And so think about the variables that you will collect that speak to your concept on how you're going to know if there's a change within your concept. Think about too demographic information. While the demographics might not be part of your question, however, they give you valuable information for your study. It lets the readers know that the sample or your participants are representative of your population that you're interested in. Say you're looking at PT students, well, you want to have demographic information that shows that your participants are representative of the larger population. Demographics are also useful if you want to run a regression analysis, if you want to see if there are any sort of variables that have an impact on your outcome. The other thing that I think about for demographics is if I've got two different groups that are going to have two different interventions, I want those two groups to look the same, because I want to show that if my intervention has done something, if I can show through the demographics that my two groups are similar to each other, then if there's changes in my outcome, then it's probably due to the intervention and not some confounding variable that might be a difference between the demographic information. So then when you think about, when you're collecting your data, you're going to think about what variables speak to your overall concept. So again, sometimes what you'll find is that there might be instruments already out there in the literature, and you might not know right now. So you need to really go back and delve into the literature and see what you can find. How have other people defined your concept? And then for the assignment, if you don't know, please put something as far as these are the instruments that I'm thinking about. Just let me know your process. Also, when you are putting in your variables, it just do bullet points. There doesn't need to be a text there. So this lesson is really part of your methods section that will go into your proposal. So again, we're just really trying to work through different aspects of your proposal to help you piece this together. By the end of the semester, you should have more of a finalized product moving forward that your committee will help you with. But please feel free to reach out if you have questions or concerns or need help brainstorming. I'm happy to email or meet on Google Meet. Just let me know. Okay, you guys, have a great week, and I will see you next time.